Hello and welcome back to Roadmap, Auto Trader's product and technology podcast. I'm very pleased to be joined on the sofa today by three brilliant guests, and I'm very excited to say the first time we've been joined by not one but two of our customers. So James Baggott is a motoring journalist turned used car dealer, founder and chief editor of Car Dealer magazine, and more recently owner of the Clever Car Collection, an independent used car dealer looking to experiment with and embrace the power of tech and AI. Hello, James.
Hello.
And John Ray, who works alongside James, as I understand it, helping him with a lot of his tech, and is the host of the Car Dealer magazine. Car Dealer magazine podcast. Hello, John.
Hello.
And Pete Jones, principal product lead at Auto Trader, who looks after our data and AI products, and fairly regular Roadmap guest. So, hello, Pete.
Hello.
So, James and John, before we dive into our products and technology, motoring journalist to used car dealer, how did that come about?
I often ask myself that question and wonder why on earth I've got into this. So we decided last year, it was about this time last year, November 23, that we wanted to try and do something different. My family are car dealers. So my dad used to work for HRO a long time ago. He was a salesman. My brother used to run a used car dealership just down the road from where I'm based, actually. And I used to spend my Saturdays going down there and sitting in, watching him do the deals and seeing him go home with massive wads of cash in his back pocket and go to the bar and spend his 20s. And always used to look on with some admiration and just enjoy spending time in that sort of world. I ended up writing about the trade. I ended up writing about cars. I'm a petrol head. I'm really passionate about cars, but never actually got onto the sales side. I launched Car Dealer magazine in 2008, and I've been writing about the motor trade since then. And all the time, I've been constantly saying to people like John, who's been with me at the business for a long time, I like to do it. You know, I'd really like to have a go myself. And it got to the end of last year and decided that actually now was quite a good time to do it. And we just thought there was a huge amount of conversation at that time in the industry and just in general in the public. ChatGPT had been launched last year for wider use. There was a lot of AI talk, and I just thought it'd be interesting. I was having these phone calls with car dealers saying, you know, how can I use AI? And lots of businesses were saying, how can dealers do it? We thought, well, what a great opportunity to just try and launch a business using AI as much as possible. And that's how the idea sort of came about.
And talk us through the business at the moment then, how, like, its size and type of...
Well, the Clever Car Collection, as it's called, is the name that AI came up with. It wasn't our name. You know, right at the beginning, we really tried to embrace using AI as much as possible. So, you know, you'll see, so it's a video series on YouTube. There's called the AI Car Dealership Project, so people can go back and watch those early ones. And I sat in front of the computer asking ChatGPT pretty much everything. You know, what do I call this? You know, John laughs because I had to talk to AI politely. I used to, you know, I thought it was a person I had to have a good conversation with. But yeah, I'd ask it many questions. You know, what should we call the business firstly? And it came up with a list, and we would refine it. And Clever Car Collection was one that sort of stuck and I quite liked. We also used it for sort of stuff like coming up with a bank account. You know, what bank should I use?
Very successfully,
very, very unsuccessfully. But now, I mean, you know, what we're nearly a year on. We've moved into a premises, so I've got a small unit at a shared business centre. We can get 4 cars inside. We've got sort of a reasonably unlimited parking outside, so we've got, as it stands today, 12 cars in stock. We advertise 7 at any time on Auto Trader. And we turn them over last month we sold 10. This month we're mid-November and we've sold 8. So we're not a huge dealership. You know, I think it's probably stretching the imagination calling us a dealership in some ways, but we're a small business that's learning a lot, and it's been an interesting journey so far.
So I'm a regular listener to your podcast, and I find it super interesting hearing you talk about your experiences of the different products and tools that you use during that. And I know obviously you're a kind of user of Auto Trader. Could you talk a minute to talk us through what a typical day looks like, the different types of technology and products you use, and any sort of role that Auto Trader's products and data play in that?
Yeah, well, I've made no secret about the fact that Auto Trader is absolutely key to the way that we've set up this business. I mean, it started with a conversation in these offices with the team here, saying this is what we'd like to do. We'd like to set up a car dealership using AI. And my question to people like Mark Thornborough and David Hawksworth was, how would you do it?
What's your best practice?
Yeah, what is your best practice and how would you do it? What can we do to be successful? And they explained how we could use data, how we could source stock. I mean, my first question is, what do I buy? What do I sell? Because I'm not a car dealer. I know what I like. I know what vehicles I like to drive, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's what consumers in my area want to buy. So the conversation then was, well, we can't tell you exactly what those vehicles are, but you can use our tools. So we were introduced to the likes of retail ratings, market health, days to sell, and those sorts of key data points have played a huge part through our stocking process over the last year. So everything we buy, I like to have over a 90 retail rating if I'm choosing to buy it. So by that I mean if I'm looking on Motorway or CarWow, I want those cars to be over a 90 retail rating. If I'm offered the vehicle by part exchange from another dealership, or it comes about as in a slightly different way as no acquisition cost, I might slightly flex those profiles. But predominantly we like them to be over 90 retail rating. We like days to sell to be under 30, and we like market health to be in the positive. Every time I'm searching for cars, when the list comes out in an evening for CarWow and Motorway, the first thing I'm doing is retail checking every car that's in my area that I think are going to hit those metrics, and I will only bid on cars that do. What's been the result of that? Well, we have turned our stock quickly. Our average days to sell for this year has been 16. We've had a review of the account this morning, and they're saying that how good that is. I mean, we've got no way to kind of benchmark that, but only from what the team at Auto Trader tell us. But 16 days to sell means that we're turning our forecourt about 1.5 times a month, which for us is great. And that's come about because we've bought those high retail rating cars. So Auto Trader's data is absolutely key to what I do. And I'm not just saying that because I'm sat here, but nobody else offers the similar sorts of data. Nobody else can tell us what we should be buying because people in our area are searching for it. And we even use it when it comes to the pricing. The pricing is absolutely critical. We work retail back. This was something that was slightly alien to me when I started this business, but it was stuff that we've been taught by the senior team when it comes to the data side of things. Working retail back is the best way to do it. So we don't take as big a margin as some other dealers would want to, but that enables us to buy those cars that are a higher retail rating, which means we can turn them quicker. So the data that Auto Traders offers is critical to the business. I couldn't run it without it, if I'm honest. Even now, with a year's worth of experience, I'll use that term loosely, I still check every single car, and I'm still looking at Portal every single day to see how adverts are performing. If it's dropped out of a green into a yellow, like a couple have, why has that happened? What can I do to make that better? And the only way that is through data, isn't it?
So Pete, you and the team look after quite a lot of the products John's talked about there. I guess maybe for the kind of benefit of the listeners who might have more of a kind of product and technology focus, should we pick a few of the different products, and maybe you could kind of lift the hood a little bit and talk about what goes on to enable businesses like John and James to have access to products like that. Obviously, if you've got any questions as we go through that, feel free. So should we start with valuations? Obviously, we kind of have a product that helps people understand what cars are worth.
Yeah, I mean, that's really where we started with the journey around our data products, what vehicles are worth. It was interesting, you said you started with what should I buy? And we've got that now, and we've got products like retail rating that help with that. But we actually started with valuations first. That was about 10 years ago now. We started that. And in terms of what goes into it, it's really a combination of the data that we have access to as Auto Trader, as that marketplace, and the scale of that data, but then also the expertise that we've invested in that period where we've got data scientists, data engineers, real experts at working with that data, and then being able to translate that scale into effectively something that's actionable for you as a retailer? How can we turn all of this insight into something that gives you an answer that you can trust in, but also is easy for you to use? So there's a combination there between how we present the information and then how we form products around that, so that you can go in, and you mentioned going in and doing retail checks on the stock in an evening. How can we make that process for you as easy as possible, so that one of the things we hear from car dealers is how time poor they are and how much things they've got to worry about. So what heavy lifting can we do through that data science and engineering to provide you with tools that are really simple to use and help you do the job that you need to do as quickly and as possible, and hopefully get the right answer as well.
We were chatting last night about like sunroofs or tow bars, the things that actually can have a pretty material impact on the value of a car, and we pick those sort of things up in the valuations as well.
Yeah, so that was quite an interesting development for us. So there's kind of two ways of looking at the valuation of a vehicle. You've got that initial value, so that derivative, as we would call it, that specific piece of metal, that make, model, how much is one of those generally worth in the market. But we know, and you guys will know, that every vehicle is unique. So you've got things like the age, the mileage of the vehicle, but crucially as well, the specification that's on it as well. So if it does have an upgraded sunroof, if it does have a nice kind of entertainment system, sat nav, those kind of things, like what value does that add on to the vehicle? And that's super important, because we know, consumers will pay more for certain features, and retailers will typically price vehicles for the features that a particular car has. So how can we make our valuations more accurate by taking that stuff into consideration? And the way that we did that was through a machine learning model. So it was through AI, where we feed in all of the pricing data we see, but then also, as we're feeding that information in, we're looking at what optional specification each vehicle has. And then the AI model is essentially building a pattern for, okay, when I see this option, what typical uplift do I see on the valuation based on the fact that it has this set of options? And then over time, by doing that, you can build a picture of what options are worth in the used market.
I find the pricing really helpful. Auto Trader's pricing, especially where it's, and I actually quite like the pricing flags. I know that was when they were introduced.
Controversial.
It was reasonably controversial with dealers, but it was because it was unusual and new to them. But I mean, as a new dealer coming into this, and that being the only way I know things, when people come along to see my cars and say, "Is there anything you can do on the price?" I say, "No, I don't price my cars. Auto Trader prices my cars. You can see there it says it's a good price." But what I can do is I can give you a service, I can give you an MOT. And more often than not, customers are happy with that. They just want to know that the car they're buying is good value.
Yeah.
And I find that pricing flag really useful in that respect. They don't know there's a difference between good, great. And I find that's kind of, you can use that to your advantage in some ways when it comes to selling cars. So yeah, pricing thing is really useful.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's good that you've got that kind of positive view on price indicator labels, because that is one of the things where when we were bringing it in, there was a lot of resistance to it, like in terms of why are we choosing to do this as Auto Trader? And it was really about it was actually, and I think one of the things which is we try to get across is it's actually beneficial to the buyer and the seller. There's sometimes a perception that it's a buyer, it's only something which benefits the buyer of the vehicle. But what we actually found when we were looking to introduce that is that haggling over the price is one of the things consumers hate doing the most. And to the point where it would actually put them off buying a vehicle or going to a particular seller because they were like, "Oh, I might have to haggle on the price." And price indicator is our way of essentially trying to make it more transparent a process, so that the person buying the car can have confidence in the seller that they're not getting ripped off, as you say, and it's a fair price. It's not always about getting the cheapest deal, but I'm being treated fairly as a customer of that retailer.
Yeah, I mean, I've sold 60 cars now since launching Clever Car Collection, and I've only dropped the price after being asked on one of them, and it was £100. And it was a case of that person really wanted a deal. And I think the only negativity on the pricing comes if you haven't used it at the start when you're buying that vehicle. If you bought that vehicle like we do, using how much you can advertise it on Auto Trader at the very beginning, of deciding to buy that car, it shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah.
So you talk about using the data to buy the car, and then or the valuations data to buy the car, and then Pete, you were saying we've sort of moved from valuations into demand metrics. Can you talk us a bit about retail rating and the kind of data that James and John used to buy stock as well?
Yeah, sure. So that was the natural progression for us. So once we'd kind of solved the valuation problem of how much to buy a car for, it was then looking at, well, the next thing that we might be able to help with is knowing which vehicles to buy. And one of the key things we have visibility of is what consumers are searching for on our marketplace. So if we can, again, if you consider the scale of that, I talked about scale with valuations, the scale with that is even greater. I think we're over 70 million visitors to Auto Trader every month. And it's, again, how can we take the scale of all of that data and make it something that's actionable and useful to you as a retailer? And that's where we came up with retail rating. So scale of 1 to 100. And essentially, the higher the score, the more retail potential there is in that vehicle when it's being sold from a particular location. So it's a really powerful metric around distilling all of that information, all of those insights we see in terms of what consumers are doing on our marketplace, and then giving that information to you in a way that's really easily translatable. And as part of that, we put contextual metrics around it, because having a simple score that you can look to is great, but understanding, we knew some retailers would want to understand how we've achieved, why we're giving a particular score to a certain vehicle, especially if it doesn't align with their expectations. And that's, so we, as well as producing the retail rating metric, we produced the insights into what's led us to that score. So that's showing things like the days to sell, so projecting how quickly we think the vehicle will sell, but then also showing that supply demand dynamic. So, the market can be favorable either way, or both, ideally, where, it could actually be, demand is relatively stable, but if supply is constrained, that can still be a really positive market for you as a seller. So again, how can we surface that information in a way that's really helpful to the retailer wanting to understand, okay, what stock should I be looking to bring in?
And we log it on every car before buying it, what the retail rating was, what the projected days to sell was, and what the market health looked like, whether it was a plus or minus. Now, I get that it's only in the last 7 days, and it's more often than not, it's worked in our favour. But we have had some where it hasn't worked quite as well as we expected. And I think it's sometimes we found it slightly falls down when cars are slightly strange, and by that I mean a really low mileage, 10-year-old car. The pricing you get given by Auto Trader is a lot higher, but we find that customers don't necessarily care about the lower mileage. They want a newer plated car. So you sort of have to take that with a bit of pinch of salt, but you learn that in time. I think if we've made any mistakes over the last year, it's probably been because of that.
Yeah, or the colour red.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I think that is
flat
the other
red.
thing. Colours don't. It doesn't. Those data points don't give you don't adjust for colour. But if you don't understand that, we didn't know that red cars aren't as popular. I quite like red cars, but it seems consumers don't. But if you haven't got
in your area, don't
well, in our area. But so if you don't have the experience of that, it's quite easy to make a mistake. I mean, I had a Volkswagen Golf, for example. It was a 92 retail rating when I bought it. It sat around in my forecourt at the time, it was my driveway, for I think it was like 25, 26 days. Well, I like to try and move stock under 30 days. So I traded it on. And the guy who bought it was up near here, actually, not far from Manchester. He sold it the next day. So it was popular, but just not in our area.
I mean, it's the right football colours,
Yeah,
actually, Portsmouth, red is not the colour to be for football, thinking about it.
Not that I ever think of that, because I'm not a big football fan. But it's these sorts of kind of...
I am, obviously, massively.
These sort of slight tweaks that you have to layer over the data with experience. And as a new dealer, I haven't got that experience. That just comes from talking to people or actually making those mistakes along the way.
Yeah, I was going to say it's really interesting you mentioned that there, because one of the things when we were developing retail rating, a lot of the internal conversations we had was how would the data be received by retailers. This isn't something that they necessarily had access to before. Prior to it, us having these data products available, it was very much gut feel, solely on experience, or around like, well, I've sold those before, so I think I can, and I've got a good result, so surely I'll get a good result the next time around. So we were moving from this world where there wasn't really any data really for a retailer to use. So that led us to, would it lead people to make incorrect assumptions around things? Or one of the things we really wanted to be careful of is that we want to foster that trust in the data. And that's something we've learned as Auto Trader over the last kind of 10 years or so, as we've been doing more and more with our data products. Trust is so hard to build and so easy to lose. And you're always going to get those instances where, even with the most accurate data, if the right person just walked, we could say something's a really slow selling vehicle from your location, and it just so happens that the next day somebody walks in and it's just the perfect vehicle for them, and that bucks the trend. And then it's a case of, well, was the data wrong in that instance? And really, when we're developing data products like this, it's around us getting the confidence that the data works at scale. So if 99 times out of 100 the data is right, that's so much better than having, for the one time it books the trend, and hopefully books it in a positive way where you think you've got a slow selling car and you sell it quickly. You will get a better result from using the data than not using the data. So when we were developing retail rating, that's one of the things we did, is we developed the metric, and then we had it in the background running for, it was around about 6 months. We had the data available internally within Auto Trader, and we were logging the retail ratings on across all of our customer stock. And we were building that picture ourselves and getting that confidence as Auto Trader that this data is really powerful and it really works, because we could see that what was happening in the real world married really well with what our models were projecting was going to happen. So by the time we actually came to launch the product, we had a really, really high degree of confidence in the data. And then we just had the job to convince retailers.
One of the things that I would find useful is a projection, on a retail rating, because I have fallen foul a couple of times of buying a high retail rating car and then that dramatically dropping off. I've got a Suzuki Vitara in stock at the moment. It was over 90 when I bought it. It's now around 80, I think, maybe slightly less. And it's stuck around a little bit. But
how many days is that for context, James? Because you have a different idea of stuck around for a bit.
21 days. But for us, it is. It's not great for us. But what are you developing anything that's going to help give a kind of plus or minus of what that projected retail rating will be in 7 days, 14 days?
We'd like to. I think it's something we've talked about internally. We don't have any concrete plans around it, because the big challenge we have is it's trying to second guess consumers at that point before they've done it.
Yeah,
and it might be possible, and I think it's definitely something we'll explore. I think it's we'll have to get the confidence that if we were to do a projection, that projection is going to be. It's, I suppose, with any projection, it's degrees of accuracy or degrees of wrongness. You're always going to be wrong, but you only want to be slightly wrong.
Yeah.
So we'd have to get that confidence that it helps you get a better result. I think that's a danger that like data products generally can fall into, is sometimes something feels like a good idea, or you think it's actually going to make things improve things and get to a better outcome, but actually, it doesn't actually deliver on the promise. And that's something we're really keen to avoid, is unless we can build that internal confidence like we did with retail rating, we'd rather not do it than do something. And then going back to that trust piece, if we were to launch a new metric, a projection on retail rating, for example, and we couldn't get it to work to the degree of accuracy that we would want it to, we risk undoing everything else that we build as a technology company.
The other thing I find useful is you give an overall retail rating, but also there's a graph underneath that kind of gives you an idea of where other models, or say other Volkswagens, where it fits in terms of that. Have you thought about doing a separate retail rating that's kind of model specific? Because actually that retail rating is overall as a market, isn't it? If it's a 57, for example, for the market overall, but in Volkswagens it's right at the top end of that scale, it does mean it's still popular for people searching for Volkswagens. Have you thought about changing that at all?
We have. It's something we actually talked about when we were initially building that specific measure, as you mentioned there, is we were trying to strike a balance between how complicated do we make it, how much is too much information, and I think because we've had the products available for a number of years now, I think we're at a different point than where we were when we first built the products. And I think there's more appetite. What we've actually seen is, retailers kind of go on that journey with us to the point now where they're actually wanting us to do more and more and more and give them more and more information, which is a great place to be in. And I think giving that extra level of information is probably more warranted now than it was when we originally built the product, because back then we didn't even know if we could convince people to start using this type of data when sourcing stock in the first place. So we were trying to strike that balance, but I do think we're in a different place now in terms of people's appetite for data, people's confidence with using data as well. And I think there's things where we could do model, body type, even age cohort, price bandings. There's different ways we could show the demand information to help you, make more informed decisions. So yeah, it's certainly there's an opportunity there where maybe timing wasn't right previously.
So James, John, you've used a bunch of data to find the right cars, price them. You've got them advertised on Auto Trader and other platforms that you advertise your stock on. What are you then doing in terms of understanding how well those vehicles are performing in the marketplace?
Well, I mean, I look very carefully every day at how those on how those adverts have performed importantly on Auto Trader. I mean, I look, the graphs I find very useful on how many people looked and whether it's in. What I like is the green and yellow and reds, because it gives you a very obvious idea of how well it's performing against other adverts of that type, because it might only have 5 people look at it, but actually for that model, I find that really useful to know that that's still high performing for that car. We look at it daily, and because when you've set up a business, you bought the cars and you've got them advertised. There's not much more you can do. Joe, who's helping with this business, he kind of say, you can't just shout at the door, iX35 for sale. Does anybody want one? It's not a market. It's not a market stall. So you can only advertise it as brilliantly as you can and put all of the effort into it, and then hope that the data's right. That can be quite frustrating. And I'm constantly looking at the data, trying to understand why that car hasn't sold. But what I find is that data helps give you some understanding and makes your job a little bit easier, because you don't stress as much if it hasn't moved on 21 days after buying it.
I think what I find really interesting is that all these tools that we're talking about here, presumably you guys didn't come up with these with a kind of James in mind. This person starting with absolutely no knowledge whatsoever. Really, as you said, it's about layering information and giving people as much info as possible. But here is someone, no offense, James, here is someone who's come in with no gut feeling necessarily, or, got no idea what to start with. And it's worked just using the data 98% of the time, really, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think it's certainly enabled people like me. And we know lots of people who follow the Clever Car Collection videos and listen to the podcast, who have gone out and copied our idea, gone out and copied it completely, following the data, buying cars. I know it's worked for them too. We've got a couple of WhatsApp groups where people discuss it, and I see the experience. I can see the real life experience of people doing it too. But it's those older dealers who have probably been doing this a long period of time, who've got that gut feeling. I suppose there's kind of a bit of a danger for those people to get stuck in a rut. Is there? They could just, like you said a moment ago, always buying the same cars because they know it sells. Has this given them the experience to go out and buy new stuff?
Yeah, and I think some of the things which has happened, it's probably been a bit of a bit more of a benefit for some retailers, or what's maybe accelerated them on that journey, is just the changes we've seen in the market over the last couple of years. Everything, going all the way, back to COVID a few years ago. What that led to changes in the market, like franchise retailers selling older stock because there was supply issues. They suddenly changed their profile of stock, so they were stocking older vehicles, which then made the choice of vehicles available to independent sellers changed as a result of that. And all of a sudden, the cars they'd been buying just suddenly weren't available anymore. So you had no choice if you wanted to continue operating. You had to, diverge the kind of types of vehicles that you would typically sell. So you haven't got that, retailers who have always sold, German marque, BMWs, 3 to 5 years old or whatever it might be, suddenly that stock wasn't available at a price was where they could make any margin on those vehicles. So they had to go out and start looking at different products. And then in that instance, they would then come into Auto Trade and say, what can I do? How can you help me kind of make this change? So I think it certainly had there's certain things which have happened, which have maybe accelerated that a little bit. But we still across kind of Auto Traders customers, we've got, with anything new that we do, we're doing some new AI products at the moment, and you'll get your really early adopters. And then you've kind of got the mainstream, and then there's people who kind of take the longest time to kind of come on that journey, but they're bit by bit, they do kind of, it becomes the norm and it's not the new thing anymore.
What I find particularly interesting with the data is when I get a car that's offered to me by another dealer, for example, a part exchange. I normally don't turn those down because there's no acquisition cost, but it means that I do buy cars well outside of my normal metrics. So what I find really interesting is how they perform. Often when they're like a 50 or 40, I would never ever go out on CarWow or Motorway or other auction platforms to buy those cars. So when they kind of fall in my lap and I have to sell them, it's interesting to see how quickly they compare to the data, because there's an opportunity, I think, in that market. If the kind of 40s to the 60 retail rating, not everybody's out there chasing them and looking to buy them, so they go for less money, but there's still an opportunity to make probably more margin as a result, because not everybody's going for them. So it's trying to understand the data to find where those opportunities are that I'm constantly searching for. How can I get those cars that I can make a bit more margin on that not everybody's trying to buy?
Yeah. And you mentioned at the start some of your experience with AI products, finding a bank account, naming the business.
Yeah.
Have you tested, worked with, stuck with any AI products that are more kind of integrated into the day-to-day operations?
So I started this project out as the AI car dealership project, and over the last year, it's frustrated me, if I'm honest, in what it can and can't do. I sort of had this grand plan, this grand imagination that I would just talk to ChatGPT and said, can you set up the advert for that Ford Fiesta, and it would sell it for me. Unfortunately, there's huge steps in the selling process. Excuse me, huge steps in the selling process that need manual input at the moment. There's lots of different systems that you need to log into, lots of double keying. I can see where the opportunities are for AI. It's just the solution out there at the moment isn't available. I mean, we've used it for things like running bulk retail checks on cars. So we'll bring in lots of auction catalogues when we've done some big buying projects. We've tried to run them through AI to tell us which ones we should go
by
go
which
for.
You mean ChatGPT, say, process this spreadsheet for me.
Yeah.
And in reality, a spreadsheet is always going to be the best way to process a spreadsheet because ChatGPT starts either going, oh, this is in a UTF-8 format, please convert it to all that sort of stuff. Or worse, it starts hallucinating. So
it was making up registrations.
It went, oh, the best one to buy here is this Citroen DS3 registration, whatever. And you look it up and it doesn't exist. So really strange situation. That's the kind of stuff we've come up against, isn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, in last week's video, for example, I've launched a new website called Sell Your Car to James. So it's where I'm going to try and hyper locally target the area to try and get people to sell cars to us, so we can have this acquisition source. So I went to ChatGPT and said, "This is the product we've launched. Excuse me. This is the product we've launched. How do we market it? What do we do?" And really, the results I got back from ChatGPT were just a glorified Google search. And you want a little bit more help. You want it to actually go out there and say, this is how you set up your Google ad. This is how you do. This is the sort of creative that will work. This is your marketing campaign for social media. These are the hashtags you should use. It's not got that additional step of where it's making life easier. You still have to interpret AI. We're dabbling with a number of different products, AI related ones like chatbots for the website are going to be put in place. But a business of my size, I think what this project has shown me and the industry to some extent is that actually AI isn't quite there yet to help solve all the ills that the motor trade has. There's still a lot of it that you have to do as a human. Whether that's a good or bad thing depends on what side of the fence you sit. But when it comes to sales, people really want to speak to a human. They want to meet the person they're buying from, and especially so when it's a used car that's under £10,000. You want to trust that person. You want to know they're going to look after you if there's a problem with it, and that means that they want to come and shake your hand.
I think to be a bit more positive, I think it largely depends. The issue that we're having is, or that you've had, is more excuse me, AI tools themselves, as in we're not finding the right tool for the job. Chat GPT is not designed to do, well, it claims to be designed to do lots of things that we like, process spreadsheets and stuff, but realistically, if it was AI tools built by people that know, well, say AutoTrader, for example, if it's an AI tool built into AutoTrader, it's probably going to work better for what you want to do than asking ChatGPT to understand how a dealer works. I guess that's the issue, isn't it? It's the widely available stuff. We thought, can you do it with £14 a month on a ChatGPT subscription? No. The answer is no.
Yeah, and that's
that's
absolutely it. That is absolutely it. Can you set up a car dealership just using AI? No, you can't. You have to put a lot of time, effort, blood, sweat, and tears into doing it yourself. And there'll be a lot of dealers out there who watch our videos, listen to our podcasts, who will be thankful that that's the case. There'll be others out there thinking, I wish they managed to solve it.
That is, however, quite a neat segue into some of the AI tools that Pete and his team have been working on more recently and actually launched this week. So maybe we could talk a bit about Co-Driver and where we see that going.
Yeah, sure. So it's really interesting hearing the feedback that you've had, your experiences of using it, using AI tools, and we came to a similar conclusion ourselves. So when we joke about, like, we at AutoTrader, we did AI before it was cool. So we've been doing it for 10 years. And as you say, with the launch of ChatGPT, that kind of caught people's imagination. And specifically the introduction of large language models. And it's that feeling of a human interaction. I think that's kind of caught people's imagination. But we've been slowly over the last 10 years, through valuations, through retail rating, building our AI capability to the point where we've got the technology internally and crucially the expertise in terms of our people to really approach this in the right way. So rather than say you could build a product that generates advert descriptions for you, for example, for vehicles, by essentially just putting a wrap around ChatGPT, calling it something, and then calling that a product. And we didn't want to kind of just take something that was kind of like that gimmick approach to it. We actually want to solve real pain points and real problems. And understanding, part of that is understanding the limitations of the technology and understanding where can it actually really add value. And that's kind of how we approached it with our Co-Driver product. Is we looked at, thinking across all the retailer jobs to be done, where do we think, with our knowledge of the technology and how we can use that technology crucially within combination with the data that we have, to deliver solutions or tools that really kind of help the retailer and actually solve problems. And that's where we came up with the features for Co-Driver, at which, we've got things in there like the ability to write an advert description, but rather than just going to a generalized ChatGPT and saying, write me an advert for a 2018 Vauxhall Corsa, what if we could take the kind of that technology, that large language model technology, combine it with the very rich kind of unique data sets that we have as AutoTrader, and the result you'll get from a tool that has been designed from the ground up to do that particular task is going to be much better than what you're going to get from a generalized ChatGPT model that has been trained on a huge amount of data, but quite generalized, and has been designed, as you say, to do a lot of things. But, if we can design tools that are designed to do one thing and do it exceptionally well, that's where it can actually deliver those benefits to retailers. So with Co-Driver, that's essentially what we've tried to do is take some of the kind of transformative technology that we've seen over in the last couple of years and kind of marry that with kind of our experience over the last 10 years to produce tools that are going to hopefully really help our retailer customers.
One of the things that I've seen that you've shown me on the on the picture front is that it reorders the pictures for you, depending on what the consumer like. Was there any plan or thoughts into making those pictures better for dealers? There's a lot of products out there. I get promoted them all the time on Instagram and stuff of these
background removal.
These background removal things. So
Yeah.
do consumers like those? Did you think about it? Is that...
We did think about that, and it is something that we may explore in the future. I think initially when we looked at it, there was a couple of things. One is a lot of our retailer customers have got very complex image photography processes that they've spent years refining. So trying to introduce something into that as kind of like a big bang thing of like, oh, here's this new tool, go and use it, it's great. And how that would then work with all of the other things that they do through that process of taking photographs of the vehicle. That felt like we were kind of running before we could walk, and it was like, okay, how can we know retailers have an issue with image order and with having the knowing where we spoke to a lot of retailers who said, because its processes are quite complicated, knowing where they've missed images and where that might be costing them sales. So, I forgot to take an image of the boot on this one particular vehicle, and that is over a year, that may be costing you sales, because wherever you miss images, that could be that image that one consumer was looking for that made them go on and look at a competing vehicle. So we were looking at it as if we can solve for those problems first, that then might lead us to a point where we look at some of these tools, which are a bit more like AI Photoshop, where it's like you say, putting the backgrounds on, image overlays. And I think before we go to that approach, we'd want to do a lot more research around how those are received from consumers. We look in the States, for example, where they generally, some of these technologies are kind of been in market a few more years than in the UK. And, we're seeing research where the jury's still a bit out on some of that stuff, in terms of does it actually, because the consumer perception is, if you put like a fake background on the image,
what's it hiding, etc.
Yeah, and so there is skepticism around how effective some of those tools are, and we may find actually that there's a way through that where we think actually we can do a really good job of this as Auto Trader, and if we can, then we certainly will look to do that. But I think it felt like there was things we could do first before we got to that point.
Because there's a danger in some respects, isn't there? If everybody's doing the same thing, there's no way that you could stand out. And I mean, I put a huge amount of time and effort into our videos that we do of cars, of the pictures, of the descriptions. It takes probably, including getting the car prepped, 5-6 hours to do a car and get it up for sale. It's a long time. I can do that because I'm a small business, but I really care about it, and it has resulted in slightly quicker sales. If everybody does the same thing or has helped to do the same thing, do I lose what small advantage I've got? These are the sort of the questions I keep asking myself.
Yeah, I think there's two things to that. I think the first is the way that we've approached the AI tools is it's very much additive, and I think you're right. I think the hope with these tools when they're widely adopted is it essentially raises the floor. So like hopefully the worst advert on Auto Trader is better than it would be today. And that then makes it, as you say, makes that a little bit more difficult to stand out. But hopefully this the idea is there'd still be that opportunity, because instead of you starting from scratch every time when you're writing an advert, for example, we can give you a really good starting point where it says, these are the things consumers really want to know about this vehicle. And you'll get some retailers who will take the suggested description and just be, yeah, I'm happy, I'm going to use that. If you've got a particular brand voice, or there's a way that you like to connect with your buyers through the way that you write your descriptions, you've still got the full editing capability to do that. But rather than starting from scratch, you've kind of got that kind of baseline of, this is what I need, these are the key messages I need to hit in my advert. How can I deliver that in a way that it sounds like it's coming from James rather than coming from an AI? So there's opportunity there through the way that you use the tool. And then hopefully with the reduction in the time investment, there'll be other ways for you to stand out, whether that's through the customer service that you offer, the way that you spend your time, because you mentioned 5 or 6 hours there, like on a vehicle. If that becomes 3 or 4 hours, it's looking at how can you reinvest that time, and there'll be new ways to stand out beyond just having a slightly nicer description than another vehicle.
What about AI in the future? I mean, have you thought about offering the solutions to dealers like us on why an advert's not performing. An analysis of that advert. At what point did the consumer leave yours and go on to another one? Was there a picture that they didn't like? Was it the video that they stopped at a certain time? Is that something that you were thinking about doing?
Yeah, that's something we're quite excited about, actually. We do think there's real opportunity there. Again, mentioned earlier around the consumer data that we get visibility of. So we can see all those, those 70 million visitors a month, we can see everything that they're doing. And it's how can we take the scale of that data and present it to you in a way which is actionable for you? And I think there is a lot of opportunity in that space. The way we do that today is we've been on a bit of a journey in terms of originally, and a lot of places still work this way, where it's all about hard counts. How many clicks am I getting through to my website? And they measure success based on, I've had X amount of search appearances, I've had X amount of advert views. But if you've not sold the car, then there is that debate around, well, how is there a reason behind it? If you've had so many people look at your advert and they haven't bought the vehicle,
why?
Why is that? And that's where I think there's a lot of value in like the suggestion you had there is helping you understand that. Is there a reason that people are intrigued enough to click through from the search result, see the full listing, but then choose not to, pick up the phone or send an email or do a live chat?
Is there no way you can have like an exit survey? Ask them why they've left.
So it's that's an idea.
Yeah. That wouldn't be annoying at all.
But I'd certainly like to, for example, I've got a Volkswagen Golf GTI at the moment. Huge numbers of people look at it on a daily basis. In comparison to some of the other stuff I've got, we've had one lead on the back of it. So there must be something with it that isn't quite right. Yeah. But it's you're second guessing. I mean, that's what I've been doing this morning with our account manager, like talking about our individual cars. What would you do? What are these tiny little incremental improvements you can make to these adverts that might make them better? But it's all sort of anecdotal. Can AI not help with some actual kind of this is why?
It's very complex, isn't it? Because for something like a Golf GTI, that's an aspirational car. There will be a lot of people looking at those. No intention of buying one whatsoever. So versus a Tucson, no one's looking at those just for the hell
Unless
of it.
They really want to buy one.
Exactly. So there's so many factors, I guess, aren't there?
I was just going to say, I think we're on that path. I think we're on that journey to something to and hopefully, I think we'll get to the point that you've talked about there, James. In terms of, we started with those hard counts. We've moved into a world now where we're benchmarking. And you mentioned, your cars are green or red in terms of the performance indicator. We've moved away from just those hard counts to giving you that context. Well, this is how we would expect it to be performing, and then this is how it's performing relative to that. I think that next step is then to further help you understand, well, why. So what if you do have a vehicle that's in, it's got a red indicator, for example, why might that be? Here's some suggestions for actions you could take to make it better. So I think we're on that path. It's just a case of, us getting to the point where we feel that we've got the technology capabilities to do it well.
I'd certainly find that interesting. I find in this business, it's you talk to other dealers and there's always this kind of, how are you getting on? Why are we quiet? Is it the weather? Is it half term? Is it Christmas just coming up? Is the Christmas market just open? It's all these, there's constant excuses or trying to work out why the phone's not ringing. But actually, if there was some hard data that AI could help with to actually say, no, this is the reason that advert's not performing, I think, most of I certainly would be very pleased to see it and take some comfort that it's not me. It might be something wider, or if it is me, I can fix it.
Yeah.
That's been a really good discussion. Thank you. Before you go, though, I would love to ask you a couple of questions about your podcast experience. Obviously, it's relatively new to us, 18 months in or so. You've also got your car dealer podcast that comes out every week.
Every Friday. Yep.
Be great if you could just talk us through your, experience with that, anything you've learned, anything that's surprised you as you've gone on that journey.
I was surprised by how many people listen to it. I think that's the biggest surprise. I mean, you should really start because you started it. Well, you and Becca started it.
Yeah, I mean, it was really Becca's idea, actually, and she's a massive podcast fan. She thought that we should do one. And
we were a bit more, I was definitely more sceptical.
Yeah, we were very sceptical about it. But I think, for us, it's a great way of generating conversation, and conversation for us generates content for our website. So we always write a story off the back of it. We're talking to a guest every week. That's an important part of our podcast. And there'll be someone from any area of the industry. It could be a small used car dealer to a franchise car dealer boss, a supplier to someone who runs an electric vehicle charging network. They're always really interesting people, and they've got a different take on the industry. The other thing that we're very conscious of, and one of the reasons for it was, Car Dealer generates a lot of news. The Car Dealer magazine website has anything between 6 and 10 news stories a day. Well, if you're a busy car dealer, as you've mentioned, as most of them are in this industry, it's very hard to keep up to date with what's happened. So the idea behind the podcast was to give people a different way of keeping up to date with what we think are the most important stories on the website. As journalists, you write stories in a journalist fashion, but by that I mean you tell the facts. You're not giving opinion. The podcast gives us an opportunity to give our opinion. What do we think those stories mean? And
a bit of analysis,
yeah. And I think that's I really enjoy that side of it. I enjoy telling the stories behind the headlines, and by that I mean, how did the story come about? How did we get that story? What was the reaction from the press office when we told that story? Did we get a furious phone call from someone, which often happens? But I think that it brings our website to life a little bit. It brings the stories to life a little bit. And I love talking to people in our industry. And now, more so than ever, it means I can find out whether they're quiet as well, or whether they're busy. Yeah, and I think we enjoy it. And I think John and I kind of we have a robust relationship where we can take the mickey out of each other quite easily. John taking the mickey out of me
through the medium of broadcast. It's great.
It works quite well. And yeah, we really enjoy it.
Well, thank you both for giving up your time. I know you're very busy and coming up here. Thanks, Pete. That's been an excellent episode. Really good discussion. And for anyone listening, don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And we'll see you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.